Everyone loves a snack. It's in our nature, but do it in a healthy way and get all natural healthy snacks from Naturebox. With snacks like blueberry nom noms, strawberry Greek yogurt pretzels, and country ranch sunflower kernels for those sunflower seed addicts, FBIA podcast listeners will get a free month and snack when they go to FBIApodcast.com website and click the Naturebox banner at the bottom of the page.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Football is America with Ron and Kyle. I'm Ron.
I'm Kyle, and today we are joined by Mike and Justin from hogshaven.com, which is the Washington Redskins SB Nation blog page. Fantastic part of the SB Nation community. Guys, thank you for joining us to discuss the Redskins today. Thanks so much.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Justin,
well, let's start. How long have you guys been fans of the team?
I'll start. So I actually grew up a Redskins fan. When I was pretty young, my family used to have season tickets, so I grew up going to some games. So it was I didn't really have too much of an option. So it was pretty from birth. I have baby pictures with Redskins gear on, so I didn't really have too much of a choice in the matter, but that's okay.
You make it sound like you were conscripted into a foreign military service.
Probably closer than you think.
So, what about you, Mike? How long have you kind of been a fan? And
not too different from what Justin said, actually. I was just born around it. My family's fairly large, and we'd have get-togethers every Sunday, and everyone would just be rooting for the Redskins. And the team was winning. Back then, this was 80s and 90s. I'm a little older than Justin, but it fit like a glove. I loved football, and my team was winning, and what I didn't know was that, eventually we'd hit this point where the team has just been so terrible for so long. But I've continued my fandom ever since. And just like a lapdog, I just keep coming back for more. So,
how long have you guys been covering the team now? And what kind of drove you guys to be pros in the writing realm for the Redskins?
So I'm a little bit newer than Mike is. I actually started with Hogs Haven at the beginning of this season. I did do a little bit of writing stuff, but this was before this season, but this was kind of my first season that I was fully committed to it. To be honest, I kind of got into writing. I'm kind of the opposite of Mike, so I'm only 20. So the Redskins have been pretty bad my entire life with a few
Wow.
bright spots.
Hence it sounding like you were conscripted as likely joining the collective.
So I'm in the same boat as Mike, though. I'm a very passionate fan, and I got kind of into it. And they made some frustrating moves, and I kind of thought, I have different opinions on this. Maybe I should start putting my opinion out there. So that's kind of how it got started. And I don't know, I got some positive comments on my writing early on, so it's something I kind of stuck with. And I really enjoy doing it, so I like doing it a lot.
Yeah, Justin does an awesome job too. For me, I actually was just a fan, and I did dabble in writing. I've been out of college many years. I have a full-time job, but I was just huge into the team, and I always had some strong opinions. And Hogs Haven actually had a contest at one point about a year and a half, 2-3 years ago now. I've lost track of time, but and I was one of the guys that entered the contest, and they selected to start being a writer with the page. So that was just awesome to me, and it all kind of fell in place from there. I started getting access into some team functions and being able to interview players. And for a guy like me that was just a huge fan, it was basically a dream come true. So then I've been able to take that, and now we have our own podcast called The District that we do every Thursday night, and we get some we get to interview the players and ex-players and stuff. So for me, it was just basically winning that contest was awesome, and it all kind of took off from there. And now it's just, we'd like to see the team be better, but I mean, there's no shortage ever of things to talk about with this team.
All right, and so along that same line, what is your guys', since you guys are such big fans, what is the strongest memories, good or bad, that you guys have of being a Redskins fan?
Well, for me being a little younger, I guess my best memories as a Redskins fan were going to the games when I was younger. That was a blast for me. This isn't unique to Redskins players, but I was a huge Sean Taylor fan, so watching him play growing up was an awesome experience. And then I don't have too many positives, so the 2012 year when they cranked out 7 wins in a row and went to the playoffs, that was really cool. That was a fun ride.
That was the best year recently for sure. I mean, my best memory, I'm sure, is the 2 Super Bowls that happened, the 87 season and then the 91 season, where, the first one you had Doug Williams and Timmy Smith running for over 200 yards and Doug Williams just throwing rainbows to Ricky Sanders. That was my first kind of real memory where I just remember seeing my dad just go crazy, and he let me stay up late to watch the game. And I think I was like in 8th grade when that happened. And then to see, of course, the 91 season where you have Ernest Biner and Ricky Irvins and still the posse is there, and Mark Rippon, and it's, those carry on. And so even now when I see the Redskins uniforms and that logo, I think about that. And then you, of course, every once in a while in the last 20 years overall, it's been terrible, but you have a season like 2012 or you have a guy like Griffin come in and, just a magical ride. The last, I think they won the last 7 games of that season and beat the Cowboys to win the NFC East. That's one of my favorite memories of all time, even though that they didn't win the Super Bowl that year. That was just awesome to see. Moments like that are why you stay a fan, I think.
We might have 1 or 2 questions about Robert Griffin. We'll have to see where that goes. Sure. Might come up, maybe. Okay, so 2014, 4-12, wins over the Jags, Titans, the Eagles, and a really awesome, cool game against the Cowboys. Even non-fans are having a great time with that one. Was this year, this 4-12 year, a success in any way, or was this just abject failure?
It's hard to say. 2014 was a bit of a disaster, to put it lightly. Between injuries to key players like Brian Arakpo, D'Angelo Hall, RG3 missed some time. It wasn't the best situation for a rookie head coach to succeed, and that's not even taking into account the drama that surrounds DC and Griffin and the locker room, and you had the Fletcher versus Jim Haslett feud, and those unnecessary things that kind of come into Washington. The other thing is, first year head coach, a lot of the coordinators and a lot of the players were still from the Mike Shanahan era. For example, everyone wants to talk about, they still had the smaller offensive lines that fit the Shanahan zone running scheme, and that's not what Gruden wants to do. So it's kind of hard to measure his success as a rookie head coach, but it's also kind of hard to call it a success. So it's almost a kind of wait and see. We'll see the moves they make, see if they make some strides in these next couple years. But I guess overall, probably not a success last year.
Yeah, I don't know any way that you could use that word. Last season was basically a wash. And like Justin said, and I guess you see those other teams when they have a new coach come in, it wasn't his players. And it's hard to even pinpoint what kind of, in Cincinnati, when he was their offensive coordinator, Jay Gruden liked to pass, I think like 60% of the time. And he had pieces in place there, a dropped back quarterback who could do the 3 and 5 step drops and hit an open guy. And he tried to make that work here in DC. And of course, he was handed the reins to Robert Griffin, and Griffin just wasn't that type of quarterback. Despite the fact that he wants to be, he just wasn't. Then he gets hurt. And so then you have Kirk Cousins come in. That works well for about 2 games. And then Kirk Cousins has a complete downfall, then gets benched. And then of course they go to Colt McCoy. He gets hurt after a couple big wins, has that great win against Dallas, like you said. And now we're back to Robert Griffin III. And so he obviously was just a quarterback carousel. And then you had the injuries like Justin mentioned. Basically anything that could go wrong did. And it's just one of those years that you just want to kind of forget about. And then hopefully, this year they bring in a new general manager with Scott McCloughan, the new general manager, working with Jay Gruden. You hope maybe they can start bringing in some what you'd call Gruden guys and see what happens.
All right, kind of on that same thing there, with their cap being at $28 million, and who is the personnel that you guys foresee staying? Who do you guys kind of see going? Is there anybody that they should really target to bring in new? Is there any kind of inside information that maybe you guys have that isn't the general public knowledge that you could share with us there?
Yeah, like you said, they're at like 28 million right now. I think they'll get up to somewhere roughly around like 31 million if they make a couple more cuts that I would think would happen. Obviously yesterday, Stephen Bowen and Barry Cofield were both let go. Those didn't come as a surprise. They were older. And as Mike just mentioned with Scott McLuhan, he is not a fan of players over 30. Definitely wants to have a younger team, a younger roster this year. And I think two players that I would definitely be surprised if weren't cut would be Chris Chester and Tracy Porter. And that'll free up a little bit more of that cap space, bring them up to, like I said, around 31 million, I believe. When you've won 7 games in 2 years, there's not a lot of people that you're dying to keep on your roster. As far as free agents that they will test the market, I would bring back Niles Paul for sure. He is not the highlight reel player. He's not going to be on SportsCenter top 10, but he's reliable. He does a lot of different things. He's a converted wide receiver. He can catch the ball. Isn't the greatest blocking tight end. Still kind of have to address that, but he's a core special teams player as well. And really, that's about it who I would consider bringing back. You might look at Colt McCoy just because he's comfortable in Jay Gruden's offense, not have to bring in another quarterback to kind of learn that offense. But I wouldn't bring back Colt McCoy for anything more than a year. But what the Redskins, in my opinion, have to focus on is retaining some of their core players. So even though they're not free agents this year, players like Trent Williams, Keenan Robinson, Ryan Kerrigan, Deshaun Jackson, I'd like to see them get some of those guys locked up a little bit more long term with some of this cap space. So that's the direction that I would go.
Yeah, I'll echo everything he just said. I totally agree with it. The only player I might also consider bringing back as a free agent would be Roy Halou, who kind of stepped up in his role as a third down back and a fairly good compliment to Alfred Morris, our first and second down back. Of course, there's some other options out there at free agency that they could look at as a third down back. Someone like Reggie Bush just got released and is out there now. Will he need too much money? Who knows? One of the things that McLuhan has said since he took over is, the route he likes to build through is the draft and not necessarily free agency. So I think you will see some guys, mid-level guys that aren't going to break the bank, but guys that fill a spot. The Redskins have such a lack of depth. Or even starters at secondary, and that's going to be something he has to attack. You'll see. I have a feeling you'll see guys like a Byron Maxwell, a cornerback out of Seattle, or someone like a Brandon Flowers, who's a little up there, but you could probably get him for cheap from the Chargers. You'll see guys coming over that have connections to the coaching staff that have been brought in. You might see a couple Giants, like there's Antrell Roll, safety out there, Walter Thurman, a quarterback from the Giants, and of course the Redskins brought in Perry Fewell, their defensive backs coach. So I don't think they're going to break the bank in the free agency, which is actually a huge difference from how things have been for many years. And I think they're really going to do everything they can to just build through the draft, trade back, hopefully maybe pick up some more picks and try to grow the team that way. And to me, that's the best way to go. Okay.
One quick question, since we're talking about free agents. You guys obviously have covered the Ricky Jean-Francois signing. And one thing I want to know, there's actually two things I want to know. One is, how does he kind of fit into that system? And two, we've gotten a lot of questions, and we have some questions ourselves on how they got that deal done and exactly how that works, where he was able to sign prior to the free agency period after being cut by the Colts.
Yeah, so he was obviously cut by the Colts, which made him unrestricted free agent. He can go talk to teams. He could sign with teams even before the free agency period started because they cut him. He does have ties to Scott McLuhan. He was a 7th-round draft pick with the 49ers. How he fits in with the Redskins, obviously they just released 2 veterans on their defensive line, and I think this is the type of signing that Redskins fans want to see more of. It's not a flashy signing. It's not a splashy, going to make headline signing. But, he's a depth guy, and he has the talent and the ability to start if there is an injury. And that's the type of players that we've lacked for years and years now. I think that's kind of the shift you're going to get in free agency, more of these players. And he wants to develop and get his starters from the draft. Like I said, when you have so many holes on your roster, I do think McLuhan's going to have to look at free agency a little more than he might like this year, just to fill some holes and get some depth players. But I definitely think it's going to be more younger players, who have more of a ceiling to improve during their time with the Redskins, unlike kind of in the past, we sign a lot of 30-year-olds who passed their prime. So I think this is a little bit of a sign of things to come under McCloughan. So it's definitely a good start. I like the move, and it was a pretty good deal. I think it's $11 million with incentives, and I think more realistically around like $9 million.
Yeah,
that was the number that I read.
Yeah, it's not a huge contract. And he's a guy who can come in and try to compete. He's 28 years old. So, I mean, he's not necessarily the youngest guy, but he's certainly not too old. And again, it's kind of in line with what I think you're going to see with the free agency moves. They're going to be mid-level guys that have relationships with the coaches or with McCloughan. And they think they can bring him in here to fill maybe a kind of a Band-Aid need until they can, restock this whole roster with guys from the draft.
I've been seeing Francois play for the Colts as a Colts fan for the past couple of years, and I will say you've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. He's never going to be a Hall of Famer. He's not looking to be an All-Pro or anything, but he is going to be solid and pretty good, and at the very, very least, he is a positive presence in the locker room. Guy has a great attitude, and hitting him, I believe it's 3-year, $9 million with 11.5 or whatever with incentives. That is not breaking the bank for somebody who's going to be a solid addition to the line.
Yeah, and that's what they need to do. And, McCloughan has his work cut out for him, and he's going to really be tested with this team. There's so much to do. And one of the questions that I talk about a lot with some of the other guys on Hogs Haven is, will he be given the reins to do so? As we know with this franchise, Dan Snyder likes to poke in once in a while and try to go for the big splashy signings or the big splashy trades. And will McCloughan be able to actually do what he was brought in here to do, which is just turn this thing around?
I definitely have some questions for that later. Now let's jump into the fun topic that I'm sure you guys could be writing a book about. Let's talk about Robert Griffin III. No shortage of information there. Obviously just blew everybody's mind as a rookie, and then a couple of injuring a knee and then re-injuring it in the regular season and then the playoffs kind of derailed it. So the next year it was terrible. I mean, is that something I need to know? What do you think went wrong? Was this just injury? Was it the scheme? Is it level of talent in that particular scheme? Is it the level of effort? What is going on with Robert Griffin and his inability to return to form?
So at the end of the day, I think the verdict's still very out on Robert Griffin III. Excuse me. I think you kind of touched on it. He blew the doors off of his rookie season. And I think that kind of created some unrealistic expectations, which I understand. DC, we've kind of touched on it. They're starved for a winning team. The Redskins have some loyal fans, and we've been bad for a very long time. And that kind of 2012, I think people, they got full hope again. There's always a little bit of hope. Redskins fans, like Mike said, like lapdogs, they come back for more. But that was really we really took a step in the right direction. And this kid's, 22 at the time? We're going to keep taking these next steps for the next 10, 15 years with him. And then it kind of came crashing down. But when you look at it, he played well his rookie season. He's battling injuries. Then he's got a new head coach. He wants him to be something that he has never been in his career. So, first of all, I think it's foolish to say that the talent's not there. I mean, he proved it in 2012. You can say system or not. The fact is he won 9 games because Kirk Cousins won 1 game as a starter. But he can win in the NFL. I think he's a unique quarterback, and you're going to have to do a little bit to serve his skill sets. I don't know that he'll ever be a strictly drop back, 5-step, 3-step drop passer, but I do think the potential's there. And then with Gruden coming in, I think people were a little unrealistic with the amount of time it takes for a quarterback like him to develop into a pocket passer. I mean, there's plenty of examples, but Mark Brunell's the first one that comes to mind, someone who really ran early in his career, and then he had to kind of take a step back and learn how to work from the pocket. And I think the potential is there. And I mean, the athletic ability for sure is there. I think if you can really get him into the pocket, I mean, clearly the athletic ability is there. If he can be dangerous from the pocket and then get an opening, I think he can have an Aaron Rodgers-like impact. I don't know that he'll ever be that good, but the skill set's there. But the verdict is still very out. he hasn't really had a fair. Like I said, DC is not the easiest place to succeed. I think RG3's figured that out. I think Gruden's figured that out. But I do think there is some potential, and it's kind of a wait and see. It'll be interesting because they have to pick up his option soon if they want to get him that 5th year, and then if not, he'll be a free agent after this season. But I do think there is some potential there.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a complicated subject. There are so many layers, and it's such a tangled web of what Griffin wants and what the team wants from him, what the coaches want versus what the owner wants. There's just so many layers to this. And, you know, like Justin said, 2012 magical season. We're running the pistol offense, read option. Not entirely, but the scary part of the offense was typically running through that, and then they were able to mix other things in, like moving the pocket, rollouts, things like that. Griffin played very well, but of course he gets hurt. Then you hear reports from Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, the coaches at the time. Griffin comes to them and says, I don't want to run this offense anymore. I want to be a drop back passer. Well, guess what? One season later, Shanahan's are gone. So now you have Jay Gruden come in. He says, okay, I can work with Griffin. I can do this. I can make him be what he wants to be. What he found out, I think, pretty quickly, even within the preseason, he found out this wasn't Griffin's strong point right now. And even though Griffin wants that to be his strong point, it's just not. He's not there yet. He has a hard time reading defenses, and they really have to kind of limit what each play will be and how many options he'll have. So what Gruden has found himself in is a spot where he wants to run a 3-5-step drop offense, similar to what he ran with Andy Dalton out in Cincinnati. And he doesn't really have a guy in Griffin who can do that right now, even though Griffin wants to do it. He just can't right now. He's not there. So, of course, you have a guy like a Kirk Cousins in the background kind of watching over and being, a guy that I think, at least reports have shown this, the coaches fell in love with him more, but they knew they couldn't go with him because of what was riding on Griffin. The draft picks that they gave up for him and, the relationship he has with Dan Snyder. So you have this situation now where you have a quarterback who wants to do something he's not great at, and a quarterback that knows it, a coach that knows it. So who wins? Gruden's on a second year of a 5-year deal, and it's been pretty clear to see that Griffin is not his first choice. I wrote an article a few weeks back saying I think it'd be best for all parties to trade Griffin right now. Get what you can for him. I hate to see it because I loved Griffin in 2012, and I don't know if he can ever be that guy again. I'd love to see it. But right now it's kind of just a mess, and I think this is going to unfold quickly. We're really going to see the dynamic of all parties once training camp starts. Gruden made headlines at the combine when he said Griffin's the starting quarterback going into the season. People were surprised to hear that because Gruden pretty much tore Griffin apart all year last year in press conferences and then benched him. So, it's just a mess. And I don't know what the answer is. We'll have to wait and see. That's part of the fun, I guess.
You actually did touch on the exact next thing I had listed in my questions, the Shanahan
Sorry,
report.
I tend to ramble on sometimes.
Oh, no. By all means, that's fantastic because then it really allows me to condense what I've got going on here. As you guys have both said, this is so multifaceted. There's so many opinions. There's so many options. There's so many ways to make an evaluation. At the core, though, we do know a couple things. Robert Griffin and Dan Snyder were largely buddy-buddy. That in some way definitely contributed to him saying, I need to be a pocket passer. I want to ask just really quick, do you think that's what Robert Griffin wanted when he went to Mike Shanahan after year one? Or is that what Dan Snyder told him he needed?
This is honestly all speculation. I don't have any inside information on this, but RG3 is not a dumb guy. He's a pretty smart guy. He's into politics. He's very intelligent off the field. I think he recognized the fact that he was never gonna have a long career if he continued. He's lighting up the NFL, but are you going to win a Super Bowl in your 7-year long career, tearing your ACL every year? I think he was intelligent enough to realize that. So my gut says that he recognized the fact that he needed to work on it as a pocket passer, but at the same time, Dan's always involved in everything, so I would not be surprised either way.
Yeah, I mean, again, and again, everything that Justin said about this being speculation and reports. None of us are inside Redskins Park or are able to kind of, find out for sure. This is based off reports, things that Mike Shanahan has said recently. But from what we hear, Snyder apparently has empowered Griffin to feel like he can go to the coach and say, this is what I want. And according to Shanahan, he felt like that Griffin had talked to Snyder before he came to him and kind of got this idea from him. But I think it's voices that around Griffin telling him, and Griffin himself. Griffin is a smart guy, very smart guy. And I think he decided that he can't continue to play this way, so he needed to change what the coach was doing. Not too many coaches like to be told what they're going to do from the player. The player really has to earn that. We're not talking about an Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady yet. This is a guy that is going to be going into his fourth year. Has he earned the right to do that? I don't know, and that's why I think some coaches have been rubbed the wrong way.
And do you think he still is in that same buddy level with Dan Snyder, or with the question of talent and who will be the guy going forward? Are they starting to distance themselves from one another?
I honestly have no idea.
Possible.
It would surprise me if they weren't still friends. But at the same time, Dan Snyder, you can say a lot about him, but I don't think you can say he doesn't want to win. He might not go about it the best way, but he doesn't want the Redskins to not be good. So it'll be interesting moving forward. But I honestly don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, we don't know. That's something that, again, we'd just be speculating on. But yeah, I totally agree in the standpoint that Snyder does just want to win. And the reason that so many fans get upset with him is because you hear the stories of him not being a football guy, but wanting to make the decisions, bringing in a Deion Sanders, a Bruce Smith or a Jeff George that 1 year, and trying to always looking for the big name. And it doesn't always work. It doesn't work. And it hasn't worked. So that's why fans have been screaming for someone to come in and be a football person to make those decisions. The one reason for optimism, and we touched on this earlier, is that fans have this offseason, is that we did get a guy in Scott McGlowan who is a football guy and has a reputation for being able to find names that aren't big names, but guys that can play. And so who knows? What Snyder's relationship is with Griffin, I don't know. But I'm sure it does change if a player starts to fall off. I'm sure Snyder isn't taking them out to Thanksgiving dinner anymore, like supposedly he did a few years back.
And let's start wrapping up Robert Griffin. Like I said, I'm sure you guys can write books on this at this point. I'm sure that this is more than, run into the ground on your website and in your day to day. Do you think he can regain top form? How would he do that? And if he can't, what do you think is the reason that he cannot do this?
I think he can. I think the talent's still there. Honestly, what scares me the most about Griffin is that you haven't seen him play with that confidence, play with that swagger that he played with in 2012. When he stepped on the field in 2012, he thought he was going to win. He thought he was going to light up the game, and you could tell that from his body language, from the way he got his teammates pumped up. I mean, that's why I think that's part of the reason why everyone embraced him so much in 2012. I mean, I can see outside of the Redskins organization how he could be. He does get a lot of hate, and I understand that from outside the Redskins organization. But I mean, being a Redskins fan, I mean, it was hard not to love him after all these years of not being good. But I do think the talent's there. Like I said, I think people underestimate how complicated it is to become a pocket passer, and even a lot of some media and people like us are guilty of. It's easy to take a screenshot and say, oh, he needs to hit this open receiver right now. But when you're in that moment and that clock is going in your head and you have a 350-pound defensive tackle about to hit you, it's not that simple. So I think there is potential, but I think it will take some time, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that, I mean, to me, Griffin has three things that you love in a quarterback. He's got a really strong arm. No one disputes that. He's a really smart guy. I don't think anyone disputes that. And he's just off the charts competitive. He wants to win. He's driven. I mean, he's always working out. One thing Mike Shanahan has said recently, and this is the part you can't help but agree with. It appears that Griffin needs to spend more time in the film room, getting down the mental part of the game. It's not that he's not smart enough to learn it. It's about putting it together from what you see on the film to doing it on the field. And because of his injuries, I think he's been somewhat limited to what he could do there, because it doesn't seem to come natural him, that natural drop back game. He didn't play it in college, and he really hasn't been able to play it here in the NFL. So he really, if he's dedicated to the film room and then being able to put that on the field, I think that'll turn everything around. The problem with him, he's very slight of build. He just doesn't have a big body. You see a guy like a Russell Wilson he's kind of built like a tree trunk, almost like a Brian Mitchell type, but he can take hits and he doesn't get hurt so badly. Well, Griffin, it looks like a wide receiver playing quarterback out there sometimes. His legs are tiny, and so he's got that as a disadvantage. Also, you see quarterbacks who come in as young guys, and when their offensive line is terrible, they start to develop terrible attributes because they don't trust their line. So they start, instead of looking downfield first, they're automatically looking to see who's coming in their face because they just don't trust what's around them. That's what scares me with Griffin. I feel like, in a way, he's kind of damaged goods in that sense. Is that a confidence that he can get back? I think so. And I'd like to see it. I'd like to see him be given a chance to do that, but the jury is out on him, because can he make this transition? What I'd love to see is if him be okay with mixing in some of this read option scrolling stuff, just enough to scare the defense. But again, another part of that, he's had injuries. He's probably not as fast as he used to be, and he's not scaring the defense like he used to. So there's just a lot there, and whether or not he can put together, I don't know. I do hope he can. I would love to see this work.
Well, and another thing, as you brought up, you got to get into that film room. The weight room's great and all that, but you guys are all too familiar with workout warriors like LaRon Landry, and yeah, there's instant laughing. He'll be a great future WWE superstar, but maybe not quite as much on the field.
Right. No, there's no doubt about that. I mean, like I said, that's part of his competitiveness. He's driven to get better, and he does need to get bigger. There's no doubt. But again, that film room study is so important for what he is trying to accomplish. He's not going to be able to do it without it. He's got to get in that film room and study. That's where he has to be.
Okay, and you guys had talked a little bit about the whole head coach versus GM versus owner. And one question we hear a lot of is, are they going to be on the hot seat this year? Are the fans happy with Gruden? Is there a realistic or unrealistic expectations that you guys have seen on the boards? You guys have kind of a unique ability to really interact with the fans when they comment on stories and stuff for your webpage. But what is the overall opinion and thought process when it comes to Jay Gruden and the interaction that they kind of have with Dan Snyder, and what is he kind of seems to kind of cycle through people a little bit, and that has to be a worry for those guys.
Yeah, I don't mean this in a negative way, but fans are not always the most practical. As soon as things start going south, which happens a lot in DC, they want change. And I get that. I hear that. But like we kind of touched on earlier, say they don't make any improvement, we have another 4-12 season next year. If you cut ties with Gruden, even more, I mean, I don't think anyone minds opening up Dan Snyder's wallet, but you're wasting a lot of money on a coach who has a 5-year guaranteed contract, but then you're looking at that cycle again. All right, well, let's bring in another head coach. Well, now we got to bring in guys to fit his scheme, the players that he wants at different positions. So that's part of the reason I think why the Redskins have not been able to sustain success, because they haven't gotten that movement. They haven't committed to a guy. They haven't committed to a type of football player that they're looking for. And I think that's kind of the hope that fans have, is that with McLuhan calling the shots, that we will start to see that the Redskins don't have identity other than maybe in 2012 when I don't even know what their identity would have been then, other than they were just fun to watch. But I would say, they have a lot of young coaches. They have Gruden and McVay, and even Joe Barry you can throw in there, recently hired defensive coordinator. So the verdict's still kind of out with them. I think there is a line where if they're not succeeding down the road, you got to cut bait. but I think you got to give him an opportunity. You got to give him some time. It is a process, and I know fans don't want to hear that because we have not been good for a long time, but drafting and developing players for that fit that are going to fit the coach's game, that are going to maximize their talent, is going to take time. It's going to take different drafts, different players. So I think if they're willing to be in it for the long haul, I think there is some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I would say expectations, I think overall, are fairly tepid. I mean, fans don't know what to be excited about outside of the new general manager because they see what's coming back so far, at least, before we've gotten into the draft and free agency. What's coming back right now didn't work. And so what are you excited about? Obviously, Griffin has his supporters who will support him no matter what. If you say anything, maybe the Redskins should move on, or they jump all over you. No, this is Griffin's team. But then he also has guys that say, okay, he needs to go. This is, it's not working. I totally agree with Justin from the standpoint of when the Redskins decided to give a 5-year deal to Jay Gruden, you would like to see them actually be married to this guy for a little bit. They do go through coaches. They have gone through coaches. They've tried everything: the experienced coach, the college coach, the offensive coordinator. And so far, none of it's worked. And eventually, I mean, granted, money talks, but eventually you have to, if you're a coach, do you want to come here? You see how everything stays kind of unsettled. Despite what happens this year, I think you've got to continue to give Gruden a chance and let him bring in his guys. And at least I'd like to see him be here for at least 4 of the 5 years, even if it's not working. Give this guy a full chance to work with the general manager and really try to run what he wants to run. And then look, if that doesn't work, you've done 4 or 5 years and it's just never worked, then move on. But at least you gave it the full shot, which is what you need to do. I mean, teams that succeed in this league, they're stable. And that is the opposite of what the Redskins are and have been for a while.
And in addition to, as you said, the coaching stability, that makes it a much more desirable location for free agency. You don't want to come in as a free agent for a coaching style to know, well, he might be gone next year. And that's
and there was a period where just having Griffin attracted free agents. I think that's why Deshaun Jackson wanted to come here, besides the fact that it was NFC East and he could play his former team a couple times a year. That would attract people because they had the excitement level of getting to play with a team that had RG3. I'm sure that's subsided. I don't know what the attraction is now outside of the general manager having a relationship with him or having a relationship with one of the other coaches. Because right now, no one expects anything from this team, I wouldn't think, for next year, at least for now, like I said, unless something big happens in the draft or free agency.
It seems like good teams don't have to spend money because they're good and people will come there because they're good, and bad teams tend to always seem to be maxing out their cap because they have to spend all that money to compensate a person to be willing to take on the weight of going to a team that is not necessarily great.
Right. Well, basically the crap that happens around here all the time. And that's another thing I like about what McGlowan has said is he likes to build through the draft. So you build your own, make guys that came in, they're Redskins, they're hungry, they want to make it in this league, or they want to do it with this team. And that's why I love his, what he's said so far. Now, actions speak louder than words, but to me, he's said all the right things so far.
Yeah, and to kind of take that a different direction, I mean, you're 100% right. Michael Bennett, competing for Super Bowls, he's made it very clear that he could have made a lot more money in DC, but he's also made it very clear that he would have been watching the Super Bowl from his couch and not participating in it. So it's a reality. And to kind of what he touched on with the draft, McLuhan learned from Ted Thompson from the Green Bay Packers, and I think they are one of the best run franchises in sports. You have their guys, they re-sign their guys, they have Packers, and they're Packers for the majority of their career. You usually don't see them go out. Last year was kind of Julius Peppers is one of their splashiest free agency signings in quite some time, and that's not exactly the splashiest signing period, and it worked out. I mean, they develop players better than anyone. That's what I have this argument with a lot of our fans on Twitter a lot. They say, oh, our offensive line is so bad, we need to spend a first-round pick on offensive lineman. I say, look at the Green Bay Packers. Their offensive line is very good, and it's built through the middle of the draft. It's not about when you pick, it's about who you pick. And I think that's what fans need to see in McLuhan. It's going to take some time, but I really think that if they can get that kind of development that you see from teams like Green Bay, I think it's easier to sustain success, and it's easier to bring in those couple of free agents instead of trying to build a winner through free agency. So it makes a huge difference.
All right, guys, you're talking the draft and him building through that. What are your biggest position needs then? When you're going into the draft, like we know that you guys have obvious positions of need, and we know where you guys are making your cuts and stuff like that. But if you're going into the draft, what is your number one concern? And on top of that, who are the key people that you retaining wise that they're going to resign? The big one that glares at me, and the reason I asked that is because of Brian Arakpo, and there seems to be just a ton of speculation on it, and we just want to get your guys' opinion on whether or not they should bring him back.
For me, listen, I like Arakpo. Another guy who DC is not the easiest place to have success. He did have a couple good years, but he had some injury trouble. I personally am of the opinion that I think it would be best for both sides if he walked away, got a fresh start and a new environment. I know Atlanta needs some desperate pass rush. He could go down with Raheem Morris, has been widely speculated, but I don't think it's a good match. Not only that, but if you're looking at the draft, I mean, there are some solid edge players in this draft, not even just in the first round. It's a very deep edge class. So you're looking second and third round, you're getting guys that could possibly contribute as well. And then looking back they drafted Trent Murphy with their highest overall draft pick next year. So I am of the opinion that bringing Arakpo back would not be a good thing. I think getting rid of some of these names, which they were good Redskins, I have nothing negative to say about them, but like Barry Cofield and Stephen Bowen, they kind of represent that overspent, weren't really on a winning team. I think it's going to be big to kind of change the culture of the Redskins into more of a winning team. Winning mentality is getting rid of some of those players. And I think not that Arakpo's been a bad or a distraction or anything like that, but I just think both sides would benefit from a parting.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if Arakpo comes back. Not that he's a bad player. I'm convinced that someone else is going to value him more than the Redskins will, because he's a guy that, can put up numbers. You might see 10, 11 sacks, even when he stays healthy. But he is a guy that if you watch every Redskins game, he'll just disappear. He's a guy that seems to get his sacks when it doesn't matter as much, versus a guy that, when you really need that pressure, he'll come in and make the play. And that's kind of what Ryan Kerrigan has turned into. But Arakpo never seems to have those moments. So, they franchised him last year. That definitely wouldn't happen again this year. And I'm convinced a team that will just see his numbers. They'll be willing to pay more for him than the Redskins will. They did bring in Trent Murphy. Whether or not he'll develop into a kind of a overall solid D end, I don't know. He was a guy who was good against the run, but also didn't bring a whole lot pressure wise. Maybe that's something he can get better at. And if you look at these mock drafts that are out right now, you see guys that can rush the passer: Vic Beasley, Dante Fowler, Randy Gregory. These are guys that draft experts have the Redskins taking. And it makes a lot of sense, because on the defense, they needed a pass rusher, someone who could complement Kerrigan, who just is a stud. And then the secondary is just a mess. I mean, the safety position is at a complete upheaval. The cornerbacks aren't much better off. We have a couple of young guys in Amerson, but Amerson's a guy who looked really good in the preseason and just kind of never lived up to expectations. We have a guy in Bashad Breeland who has played above expectations, I would say, as a fourth rounder last year. So he's basically the only positive in the secondary, it seems, right now. And they have a guy like D'Angelo Hall who's been around for a long time, but can he do it anymore? He's getting older. He's coming off a couple injuries. He had an Achilles injury. Supposedly, he's working to come back next year, and he'll be given a shot, I'm convinced, whether it's at safety, at corner. But so they just have a lot of needs in the defense. And then, of course, again, then you're talking about offensive line. Can they fill all these needs in this draft? I don't know, but they're going to have to do something there, and then obviously try to supplement it in the free agency.
All right, definitely a lot of looks going forward. We're getting to the point where we're up against the clock, so getting to the quick answers and such. Looking at the possibility that quarterback might not be Robert Griffin, quarterback might not be Kirk Cousins or anybody else, how much time has to pass until a quarterback can be drafted without the fans going absolutely nuts?
I think after this year, I'd probably say, I think just if this year isn't successful with Griffin and Cousins, I think it kind of closes the book. But it kind of helped the fact that there's not really too many quarterbacks that you want to build your roster around this year. There's not that tempting big name that Dan Snyder loves. Winston with his off the field concerns scare people. Mariota's a quote unquote system quarterback that scares people in DC with the whole Griffin situation. So I think you kind of take this year, see if there's development in RG3's game as a pocket passer. If that's not working, Cousins does end up coming in. Can he overcome his interceptions and kind of that lack of body language where he gets down once he starts throwing interceptions? And then if not, I think Redskins Nation will probably be ready to move on.
Yeah, I agree too with that. McGloin is a BPA GM. He says he's best player available. So I take the standpoint that I'm going to trust him until he gives me a reason to not trust him. If that means he falls in love with Marcus Mariota and we take him at 5, I'm just going to go with it. Does it seem to be the right idea right now for a fan? Maybe not, because there's so many other needs. But can you say the quarterback position is in a good place right now? You cannot. But I agree in the sense that I think maybe after this year, fans would not go crazy if they did take a quarterback. They're on the last year of their contract, like he said. Let this play out. I was all for it with the idea of it being a quarterback competition, a legitimate open quarterback competition where you say, okay, Griffin, Cousins, McCoy, if they re-sign him or somebody else, go get it and see who wins. And then let's win this in the trenches with our offensive line, and let's win this with defense and running the ball. We have a guy in Alfred Morris who doesn't get talked about very much, but I still think he's a guy that can be a great running back in this league, and he's shown that for his first 3 years. So we can have a great running game if we can shore up the trenches. And so, let's just see what happens from the standpoint of, can they have a real open quarterback competition? One of the reasons fans went nuts, though, is because when Jay Gruden at the Combine said Griffin's the starter. We'll see. We'll see how this plays out. I would love to see an open competition, let the best man win. I just don't know if that's going to happen.
All right. So moving on to the last one, and this is where we're going to put you on the spot, guys. So be careful. How much hope is there for this team next year to do anything substantial, whether that be the playoffs, win the division, actual Super Bowl contention? What is the realistic top and bottom cap that you as the writers feel, and then separately how the fans feel? What is the realistic version there? Not the every single fan on the couch with his beer screaming, we're going to go to the Super Bowl, but just not. We want the actual terms.
For me, honestly, and people probably won't like this, I think the highest ceiling is like 7 to 9 wins. That would be a major step in the right direction. That means someone's playing under center pretty well. That means the free agency additions and the draft additions are having some effect. But at the end of the day, this roster has too many holes. I don't think they're going to make a run at the division or a run at the playoffs or even a run at the wild card right now. I just don't think they're in that position. As much as I don't like to admit it, Philly and Dallas both have solid teams. New York's kind of in an interesting place, and we'll kind of see where they go. But lowest, I'd probably say 5 to 6 wins. I think with McLuhan calling the shots, I do think that's an appreciated move. I don't think many people understand how big of a move that was. Probably the move of the offseason, to be honest, for the entire NFL. Not just the Redskins, but so I think they'll take a little step in the right direction, but that's probably my highest and lowest expectations for the year.
You guys aren't going to like this answer, but it's just, I can't give you an answer. I mean, we won't know until we see what moves they make in free agency, what they're able to do in the draft. The beauty of the NFL is any team can step up at any time. I mean, you have your consistent franchises like the Patriots and Packers, teams we've talked about. But I mean, you have a team like the Chiefs who everyone thought they were going to suck a couple years ago after a 2-win season, I believe, and they started competing immediately. You have the Dallas Cowboys who everyone was convinced they were going to be terrible. They had lost, they had a bad defense anyway, and then they lost some key pieces like DeMarcus Ware, and everyone had them picked 4th. Well, guess what? They won the division. So you just don't know in this league. You really don't. I think that's the beautiful part of the league, that teams can jump up quickly. I mean, if you look at the roster right now, you say everything's bad. We need a huge infusion of talent. But you just never know. So much of this is just things falling the right way for you. And Injuries are going to play a role. So I can't give you an answer. Talk to me after the draft, maybe as we get into training camp, when all the moves have been made. Because right now we're just looking at the guys we had last year, minus a couple of the cuts from this week. But it's just too hard to say, and I think that's part of the fun. Now, for us Redskin fans, actually, the off season is usually more fun than the regular season, because this is when they make the moves that will give people some hope. So we'll just have to see.
All right. Well, thank you for the insight there. That is going to be it for us today. We are definitely up against the clock. So unfortunately, we are going to have to table the discussion on the Redskins name. I hope I can get one or both of you guys back to discuss that at some point in the future.
Definitely. I'd love to come on.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Once again, everybody, this was Mike and Justin of hogshaven.com. Check it out for anything related to the Washington Redskins. Nice community presence there. I know when I started reading the article about Robert Griffin being named the starter in February, I was laughing at about 10 seconds. Great chance to get some football knowledge. Guys, thank you so much for coming and being a part of our show today.
Thank you.
Problem. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right, you too.